School District Board of Education meeting. Would you all please silence your cell phones and recite the pledge? I pledge allegiance to
To
the
the
flag of the
of
United
the United
States
States of America,
to the
and
to the republic for which it
which
stands,
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty,
justice.
and justice for all.
And so first on the agenda, we have public comment, and you can see a couple emails.
Sure. So I received this email earlier today from Cheryl Salem. It's actually two emails directed both to me and to Regan. So I'm going to just combine them so everyone understands the issues. So she says, good afternoon. I have particular concerns on two matters with the 2020-2021 proposed Guilderland School District budget. My first concern is for the high school interscholastic program. I have noticed a disproportionate reduction in high school athletic program budget for girls' sports. There is reductions in the girls' high school staff, but a threefold increase in boys' high school staff. Which girls' coach sport is on the chopping block? There is also a sizable decrease in what is called NI salaries. Could you please explain what this means? Also, the equipment budget has been reduced to zero. The high school girls softball team was due to purchase new shirts. The ones we have are over 5 years old, torn, don't fit, and are missing buttons. Lastly, in computing the difference between the boys and girls interscholastic athletics, why are the girls getting less than 72% of the total funding of the boys? I'm concerned that this budget portrays female athletes a less priority. This does not bode well for the self-esteem of girls, role models we would like the girls to become, and general fairness. The second area is around special education. Within the special ed budget, there's an item concerning tuition, regular and summer school for private school placement. The proposed budget was slashed by over $58,000. How will these cuts be addressed to the parents whose children are affected by this? Many of these children attend private specialized schools because Guilderland doesn't have the ability to serve their needs. If you cut the tuition payments, will children no longer be able to attend? Many cannot return to public school based on their needs and are placed through the New York State Department of Education. Thank you for your interest. Sincerely, Cheryl Salem. So Regan, can I ask you to address some of those athletic budget concerns, please?
Absolutely. I received the same email from Mrs. Salem, and I did respond. And so the first part was asking about the increase in the professional salaries and the discrepancy between the male and the female codes. And so those are contractual increases based on what the sport is, what the rubric says the pay is, and the longevity for that particular coach. So I don't know specifically what coaches got increases to make that discrepancy, but that's the professional side. The NI, the non-instructional salary portion of her question, that had to do with the change from Mrs. Maria Mazzone, who retired last year, and Lisa Slusars, who's currently the secretary, and what the difference was between what Maria was making last year and what Lisa is currently making now. Let's see. The three positions that are up for reduction are the gymnastics assistant position and the boys and girls JV lacrosse assistants position. The equipment last year was $2,500 for each, the boys and the girls. If you remember, last year we had to purchase new soccer goals, a set at the middle school and a set at the middle school. That obviously wasn't necessary for this year, so that's why there's a decrease of $5,000 in those two codes combined. Uniforms are purchased not in equipment, they're purchased on the supply code. They are consumable. And so baseball and softball are scheduled to be purchased for next school year, spring of 21. But I also am not aware of any, I'm not saying that, she's incorrect, but I'm not aware of uniforms that have holes in them and buttons are missing. I've not been told that by any of our coaches. And am I missing something, Dr. Wiles? You're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Just the computing the difference between the boys and girls interscholastic athletics. Why are the girls getting less than 72% of the total funding of the boys?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what number she was looking at. I didn't see that in any of the codes. So there obviously there is a little bit of a difference in terms of boys and girls coaches because football doesn't have a gender match. So many of the sports like basketball, soccer, lacrosse, they have gender matches. And so football does not. It's kind of its own. And so there is a little bit of an increase on the boys' side for officials' fees and for supplies to cover that.
Okay, thanks, Regan.
You're welcome.
Neil, can you address the special ed budget question there?
Sure. In developing the budget, I work closely with our special education department, and we're looking at actual students when we look at placements for both private schools, private special education placements, as well as BOCES placements. So those decisions are made at annual review time, but that typically does not line up with our budget process. So we're looking at kids who are currently in the program, who we know might be entering the program or exiting the program. And we're really looking at each child and trying to figure out where the most appropriate placement at the time we're developing the budget might be. And that may change after the fact. Some kids each year will graduate. They may age out, which means they leave the program, or they may leave the district, so they can exit for any of those reasons. The reduction that's noted for the private placements next year is not a cut. It's really just based on the number of students and cost of placements that we can project at this point. But out of that $358,000 reduction, looking back, we have 3 students, one that is graduating, has graduated or will be graduating, and 2 that exited out of the program. That's about $240,000 of that $358,000 reduction is in those 3 students right there. So again, we're looking at this in terms of what children we expect to be here, what we believe might be the most appropriate placement. I look at this as 2 pots of money, and the kids will get placed where they need to get placed. So sometimes we anticipate a private placement and ends up being a BOCES placement, or we anticipate a BOCES placement and ends up being a private placement. We can transfer that money back and forth. It's really for the purpose, those funds are for the purpose of paying for those placements, whether they're BOCES or private, and we can move that money back and forth.
Are there any follow-up questions for Regan or for Neil? Okay, that was the only public comment that we had submitted then.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Wiles. We have next on the agenda superintendent action. And back to you, Dr. Wiles.
So you received in your materials on Friday our budget development worksheet that includes a summary of the budget we presented back on March 10th, and then several, well, actually 2 follow-up sets of recommendations for the 2020-2021 budget subsequent to that, one on April 2nd, and then the next one just last week on May 12th. These additional recommendations are really a reflection of really a worsening financial condition for the school district in light of the outbreak of the pandemic and then the subsequent economic impact in the state, and some pretty dire financial predictions that we've been hearing from those who follow this, with threats of lessening state aid, it may be dramatically so. So we have brought forward to you for your consideration, a budget that we feel is able to maintain all of the programs and services for our children, that is within the tax cap, but is also as modest as it can be in preparation for what is likely to be at least a couple more difficult years going forward. So one of the things that I just want to underscore is that although things might look different, we have not eliminated any opportunity for children in these recommendations that we've brought forward. It might be a little bit less under some circumstances or look slightly different, but all things being equal, since we don't know what the opening of school will look like next year, the programs and services available to our children at the start of this coming year will look as they did at the start of this current school year. So with that, I don't know, do you want to walk through a summary of the first part of this, or do you want to just begin the discussion? I'll leave that to you.
I think we'll start with the discussion. I think everybody was able to look at the worksheet, right? The budget adoption worksheet. I know Ben, you sent some comments. The other people have made comments. Does that sound good? Opening up for discussion. Does anybody have any comments that they want to start off with?
So I just, as a reminder, we need a motion to adopt this budget in a second, and that opens the
Thank you.
process for discussion.
We can have a motion to adopt the current budget.
So moved.
Gloria, second Judy. And we'll open it up for discussion. Hi, Barb.
Okay, I have a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. The first was the information that we've gotten from some of our classes that although they would fit the parameters of our new parameters for class size, really have classroom situations that are extraordinary. And in talking, with Marie, I think the best way to handle these situations, because you never know what's going to happen, from one moment to the next, when it comes to kids moving in, kids moving out, is to add one more FTE to our current ones that are in the budget so that we have the opportunity and the flexibility to service these children adequately. If we are lucky and we don't need to add the FTEs, then obviously it would build up our fund balance for next year. But I think over the years, we've all seen that the FTEs that we've put in pretty much have been used every year. And any money that wasn't used is rolled over, to next year. So it's not wasted funds, but it does guarantee, that we do the best that we can by the children. We've had this conversation before, having 25 kids in a classroom where there are no emotional or intellectual distinguishing needs may not be a burden, but in a classroom of even 20, where you have a lot of IEPs, a lot of poverty, a lot of kids that need special attention, that is very, very stressful. And to increase those class sizes, I think, would be very detrimental to the kids, particularly in light of this pandemic. I think we'd all agree that the children that are most affected are those that are either in poverty, those that don't have the internet connections, those that are not getting their services, be it at the FMS, mental health clinic, or with our social workers, our psychologists, our OT, our PT people. These are very trying circumstances. And for next year, to take this group of kids and place them in a larger class, I think would be very, very detrimental to them and to their fellow students. So I think by adding one more FTE to the budget would give us a little bit of comfort and, adequately servicing these kids.
You're proposing that, Barbara, right?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
I'm wondering, Barb, if you've thought about then what changes we would have to make. I don't think we have the extra 60,000 or whatever it takes to add into an FTE. I agree it's important. And in light of the letters that we got, you can appreciate some of the dilemmas. But I think before we automatically vote it in, we have to think what we would be willing in this budget to take out to meet that financial equivalent, because we don't have a lot of room to play with in terms of money that we can move around.
Right. The only thing that I see now, Neil and Marie may have a lot better insight. You would have to tap into your fund balance or change some of the other things. Now, Ben had a few suggestions that he might want to bring up where we could save a little bit of money. But that definitely, is something that I'd like us to think about. I don't think we should vote on it right now until we, hear some other ideas. And Marie, feel free to pipe in if you want to now or later or whatever.
I just want to add, I'm in agreement, Barb. Looking at the ESSA data last year, and we kind of looked across all of the categories of groups of students and agreed that equity was a huge issue. And knowing that, we have data on, not all classes are the same, not all classrooms are the same. I think the FTE would at least give us flexibility. So, could change over the summer, of course, every year that happens, but that at least we would have some room.
Neil or Marie, excuse me, could you tell us, I know you told us in one of the other meetings, Marie, I believe, how many of the FTEs that we allocated we didn't use in this past year?
We had 5, I think, in this year's, and now I'm ready. And we used, I think, 3 and maybe 3/4. Len, do you recall? I don't have that spreadsheet right in front of me. You're muted, Lynn. But
I think that that's pretty close, because if I recall, the balance left was 1 and a small fraction.
so we created 2 sections out of the FTEs. One was at Guilderland Elementary School and one was at Linwood. And the rest were bits and pieces, sometimes for special area staff, like when we create another section, sometimes it creates the need to increase a PE teacher or a music teacher or an art teacher by a 0.1 or a 0.05. And there are other bits and pieces of individual needs that have come up. So just the discussion around an additional unassigned FTE, I mean, things literally change week to week, month to month. So this very classroom in Altamont we're talking about is actually down to 49 students. Since you got that email from over the weekend, I had Peter go back and look. So whether or not 49 is a magic number is almost irrelevant here, because we do want to look at the characteristics of the students. We always do. But children come and go, and we can't predict that. And I think given where we are in this uncertainty, we may see more coming and going from our classrooms, within the district and outside of the district. What this allows us to do is to make sure that we address the most significant needs when we have the best data, which tends to be a little bit later than now. So that's why the unassigned work for us.
Marie, besides the Altamont situation, which we've been talking about, how many other close situations are there that you might be worried about?
The only one that I've heard from repeatedly is 5th grade at Pine Bush Elementary School. That class size is right in the same neighborhood, and that grade, while not feeling the effects of poverty so much, there are a number of social, emotional, behavioral needs where the mix is not great. And Chris Sanita has advocated strongly that when we're looking at the unassigned, that would be a place where we would consider that. There are other places around the district, but to use Barbara's example, not all classes of 24 are created equal.
Right.
So the numbers might be there, but there are no, at least that we know of, big concerns. So it's been those two classrooms that I've heard about since we've been working on the budget.
And we have three FTEs in right now?
We currently have 3 FTEs in, and what I think Barbara is suggesting is that we have 4 to give us a little more wiggle room.
Right.
And with the 3 or the 2 FTEs, we also have then the additional small pieces that we have to add in, right? For the art and music and phys ed.
Potentially, it's, we have to go back and look then at the total number of sections in the building and whether or not those teachers have room in their schedule. So usually those determinations that get made down the road a little bit. So we may or may not need them. Sometimes we do, and sometimes there's room in their schedule.
What I've noticed over the years that, in summertime, oftentimes we have, I think my recollection is that we had about 5 different classes that were really on the brink, even with our new numbers. And just having that extra cushion to me makes me feel a lot better about servicing the kids, if the board agrees to it. You want me to bring the second issue up, Seymour, or give
Yeah, does anybody else have any comments about the FTE that Barb's proposing?
Yeah, I don't want you to think that I think it's a bad idea. I just, we talked about it before, and I certainly understand what you're saying. I'm just saying I don't know where in the budget then we find that, Barb. So I am definitely in favor of particularly the one we've heard about at Altamont, and understand parents' concern if their child, not just there, but anywhere, is one in a class that went from, a smaller number to a larger number because of class size. And we really are only, just so if anybody's watching and listening, we're just increasing it by 1. We're not increasing it by the 6, but it's just our recommendation. It depends on the makeup, just like Marie said. And I understand. I'm not saying we don't need it. I'm just saying.
Ben, oh, sorry, Jean, you finished.
That's okay.
Ben, did you have a comment about the FTE also?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that idea. I the document that I forwarded to all of you today, the goal that I set out to accomplish with that was to restore the previous guidelines for class sizes. Because that's really what we've been hearing about from the community when we sent out that thought exchange and all the emails we've been getting, and my thought was just why are we asking the community if we're not going to listen about what their concerns are. So I did find for 1 FTE I have some really easy cuts, I think. And to restore everything, probably a little tougher, line by line kind of thing. So if this is the approach we want to take, which I think is a good idea, have flexibility instead of firm class sizes. My general thought is that our budget was unsustainable moving forward before COVID. And so I do think that we do need to kind of take a look and see what programs can be reduced over time, because not only recessionary constraints, but just the fact that our state aid is flat and will remain flat or be cut. While we have this property tax cap, this is a project that we should start working on now. That being said, I don't think that the year everyone comes back from being out of school for 4 months is the year to make the cuts, and I'm not a fan of planning a budget as if our state aid is going to be cut when we don't know it's going to be, and we might be hurting these kids unnecessarily. And as I remarked at a board meeting a little while, a few weeks ago, we have fund balance for times like this. So, I do have some proposed cuts. I don't know when we want to get to those. But even if we don't cut anything, I would be in favor of adding an FTE and taking it from fund balance if necessary.
So if we stick just first to the FTE discussion, does anybody else have any additional thoughts? It sounds like we're pretty much in support. Of course, it depends on, what room we have or what other things we're considering cutting. Or can we go to the next one? Barb, you said you had two things.
Yes, the other thing that I would like to put on as an amendment to the budget is restoring the assistant coach to the gymnastics team. We've heard about, apparently a parent wrote today, about the equity issue in female sports. This, I believe, is an all-girl team. They cost the district so little, really. The parent wrote that they bring the kids to the practice. The only thing that the district transports them for is to an away meet, which I'm sure is minimal, where there's only 4 teams. If we don't allow this and the parents don't feel that their children are safe, then that would potentially eliminate, the varsity sport. So I think for like $3,300, we could make that team whole. These kids have been doing gymnastics since they were 5 or 6 years old, many of them. And I would just, at least for this year, again, as times get tougher, we're going to have to make some terrible cuts. But for this year, I'd like to assure them that, we would like to see them continue.
Any other comments regarding the assistant coach for gymnastics?
But I also think with that sport, it's much more difficult to say, well, parents can step in and do that. The kinds of things these kids do require much more of an eye, a professional eye, people that are trained so that these kids don't get hurt. So I'm definitely in favor of that, of putting that back. If we can agree on where we can find the money.
The cost of that assistant coach is $4,480, just to make that clear.
Oh, so that $10,480 isn't divided by 3 then?
No, it's a different allocation for the different positions.
Oh,
Okay, it depends upon longevity.
Yeah, there's a rubric. Part of its longevity. There's a point system that's developed for every coaching position based on a number of factors, and that determines the stipend, and how long you've been here factors into that as well.
Yeah. Now, again, for all of us, none of these coaches may ever see the light of day again under current circumstances, but I think we should plan, for that to happen. And if we don't expend that money, then obviously, we roll it over. But I just think it's the same thing to do for the kids.
Neil, did you say 10,000 or 4,000?
The gymnastics assistant coach is $4,480. We had lumped all the assistant coaches in together. The other two, the JV lacrosse boys and girls, they're each $3,000. So it was $6,000 for the lacrosse, and then another $4,480 for the gymnastics. That was that $10,480 combined number you saw on the sheet.
Okay, thank you.
And Neil, I have a question just in terms of how far are we from the tax cap? How much money do we have? I know we had 25 cents in the first budget. How much do we have now approximately?
Well, we were right in the budget as proposed before we started this conversation this evening.
Right.
We were right at our maximum tax levy limit. So we're right at
it. So the 25 cents isn't even there.
Yes, the 25 cents is not there either. So we're right at the maximum. So anything that we do in terms of ads, we have to have either offsetting reductions or use additional fund balance to avoid not exceeding the tax cap.
Okay.
Neil, can you explain again what the FTE would be? I know it's not 240. I forgot what it was broken down by on the worksheet.
That for the coach you're talking about?
Oh, no, sorry.
No, the FTE.
For a full-time position?
Yeah,
what-
the
Unsigned.
position you were talking about.
Unassigned.
If we added one.
That's 82,000 for an unassigned 1.0 teaching position.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Neil, could I ask you a question about the fund balance?
Yes.
I'm just reviewing the worksheet, and I think I'm reading it right, that initially on the April 2nd budget, the fund balance allocation was 171,000, and then it was adjusted to be an additional 88,000. Is that correct?
Yes, we actually ended up using less of that because we had some other reductions that we proposed on May 12th. So we're
Okay.
able to bring that down by
Okay.
80.
Thank you for clarifying.
Other comments on the assistant coach, or I think if we have room, I'm in favor of it. Pretty much, I've talked about it before in prior meetings. So if we can make the room, I think, like Lori said, it's not something a parent can just step in and assist with. So I think it'd be a safer route.
My only comment is that, like I said in my last little spiel, at some point we have to cut programs, and I don't want to do it to anybody, right? But I mean, there's 12 girls in the gymnastics program. Of all the impacts, this is the smallest, which is I assume why the administration recommended it. So long term, we might end up cutting it anyway. Is my point.
I think if we can find $4,300, which I'm sure we can, we should keep it in. And I'm in favor of looking for the additional FTE. I'm interested in hearing, as tedious as it might be, going through Ben's thought process and comments on the budget that he sent out an hour ago. But I'd like to hear a little bit. I have a question on one or two of them, but I'd like to hear a little bit about what his thought process is on looking at some cuts. I'm sure we could find, we could find it in this fund balance, that's for sure. But I'm interested in taking a look at that.
And Barb, those were your two proposed amendments, right?
Correct.
Coach. Okay. So Ben, do you want to share your thoughts that you sent?
Sure. You guys can stop me whenever it gets to be too much for you. So again, my goal going into this was to restore the old guidelines for class size, and maybe to add a little bit back into our equipment repair budget. So my first assumption was, let's add back in some fund balance, and we'll get to that. And that's mostly because we've had so much savings this year. We actually are going to have, $2 million over what we can actually have in the general fund balance. Not to say that we can't put that in reserves, but there's a little bit of money out there. So the biggest cuts come in the per pupil allocations, which I asked Neil about a couple meetings ago, and it's my understanding that we have control over these. They're just loosely coordinated based on how much state aid we can get back. So if we go to, let's see. So if we go to page 13 of the draft budget, which is elementary school supervision, the last line item there per pupil allocation of general supplies. We have budgeted $7,690. Historically, for the past 5 years, I went back and pulled extra data, but those extra notations are, we've never gone over 6,000. And so on this per pupil allocation, we have $3.30 per student at the elementary level. And I would just propose reducing that to and that would save $683. That's not the big, but $683 right there. It brings the budgeted amount to $7,000, which again is $1,000 more than we've spent ever in the past 5 years. So that's the first per pupil allocation cut that I would suggest. The other one that I would suggest is textbooks. This is another item, and you'll find it on pages, let's see. Pages 20 through 22. Each level has its own per pupil allocation of textbook money. And again, going back 5 years, we never come anywhere close to reaching that number. And so, my bold proposal would be a $15 cut for each student at each level, which would bring us to a level which, again, we haven't come close to in the past 5 years. I'm sure this year will be a little higher, but I think that's because we bought a bunch of new programs and textbooks this year, which hopefully will help maintain the previous trend of the past 5 years. I did notice that the high school, we actually increased the textbook budget. And I'm not sure why that is. There might be a reason for it. And so my alternate proposal is to cut that one by only $10 instead of 15. But if we went with my bold proposal, the elementary level would have a per pupil allocation of $30. Then FMS and GHS would both have per pupil allocations of $45. And that would result in a savings of, I think, $74,000. So that's the big easy one. It almost pays for a whole teacher. Would you like me to keep going?
Does anybody else want to add in, talk about the textbook piece? And I don't know if Damien can also have, also give us some more context to that.
I have a quick question. So where has that extra money gone? Back to the fund balance each year? Are we overestimating it? I'm curious. Maybe there's a little bit more explanation to the reasoning for those.
So I can chime in, and I'll ask Neil to back me up on some of the budgeting and aid portions of this. But there is some truth to that textbook has not historically been totally spent down by the end of the school year. However, if you look back, I would say probably when I started in this position, shortly thereafter, when the state gave some flexibility into what were aidable categories and how we could spend them down, any remaining textbook funds had historically been transferred into an aidable hardware technology line. Those are both aidable categories, and I don't know when it was, Neil, 5-6 years ago, the state modified the rules so that they basically became one pot of expenditures, where in the past there were lines between them. So the aidable textbook line, for example, could never be, if you didn't spend it down, you could never use it for another aidable purpose. It's a form of expenditure aid. So when they loosened up the rules on that, that had always become a place where we could go for any outstanding technology needs. So the money had always been spent. In fact, I made it kind of a goal that we didn't waste what was aidable funding, that we always utilized it in the area of need we wanted to address it with. Some other things to know about textbook funding too. It's not just textbooks. There are other areas that are funded under textbook that are not your traditional textbooks. So for example, at the elementary level, where our language arts program is very heavily dependent on classroom libraries, the classroom libraries are funded via the textbook funds. In, I would say, the past 2 to 3 years, unfortunately, because we have competing priorities, namely this past year, the new math program, we haven't really been able to replenish our classroom libraries at the elementary level. So the need is there quite significantly for us to be able to do so. The high school textbook purchasing increases are based on updates to programs and some new courses that are in play as well. So it's a little bit complicated. It's not just a clean cut, one textbook line covers only textbook. It has some, I guess, some overlap with other aidable categories that we try to maximize the aid that we can get in the following school year by utilizing those categories well. So Neil, I don't know if you want to chime in on that at all.
No, I think you explained it really well. There was a change in the rules, and now instead of having individual allocations where you only were able to spend money in one category and get reimbursed in that category, they enlarged the pot, allowed textbooks and technology and library materials to be bundled together, so you could spend disproportionately in one area, and it was looked at in aggregate. So I would agree with Damien. I think he's done a great job of making sure we have all the resources we need, and we move the money around where we need it to help make sure that children get the tools they need, whatever they are, in terms of their educational program. So I think we maximized aid in the same way. We've continued to budget in the same way, though, as it's designed by the state. But at the end of the year, we're able to submit those for reimbursement, meet our maximum allocation, and still serve children well across the variety of needs.
And if I could just add one more thought to that, I think by reduction of textbook, which is an aidable category, should we, I'll use the elementary classroom library as an example, should we not be able to replenish those classroom libraries, inevitably we're going to have to make the purchase from some other funding line, which may or may not be an aidable line. So to be able to utilize that aidable category and maximize the revenue we get in the next year makes a lot of sense.
Or we could not replenish those classroom libraries this year, given all that's going on. I understand what you're both saying, and but we have to cut something somewhere at some point, right? And books seems like the place. Even if we're using it in for other categories. Seems like the place to start. Send the kids online like we've been doing for the past 3 months, or I think it's more important to have a teacher in the seat than a generous textbook line that we can draw on for other needs if we need them, maybe.
I disagree with the book piece then, just because I know that the elementary classrooms are already, they're not replenished often enough with book. And even though it's been digital, I think if anything, they've been using books a lot to do read alouds. I know in general they do read alouds a lot in elementary classrooms, but I just have to say from personal, like as a parent, that is one thing I've seen a lot of, and I know it's made a huge difference. So the books piece to me, I don't think we can replace that.
And Seema, if I can just piggyback on that, I talk quite often with our language arts folks, and that is one of their greatest concern, is that the developmental reading process is something that's being sacrificed, frankly, in the digital world. So they're working extremely hard to try to get books in some form in the hands of kids. In fact, we had a conversation yesterday about how we can do so over the summer months. The digital is not ideal for developmental readers at the early elementary level.
Barb, were you gonna say something?
No, I just let Ben continue.
Go ahead, Ben.
Okay. So going forward, I'll go line by line, I guess. On page 1 for Board of Ed, I propose cutting our conference budget even further to $22.50 instead of $26.50. That's $250 per board member. You know, I think the biggest suck on this code is the NISBA conference in October. Right now it's scheduled, and it's scheduled to take place in New York City. I'm not sure that that's going to materialize, and so, I think that we can reduce that, and then if we need to come up with extra money, maybe we can find it elsewhere or come up with it ourselves to supplement the cost.
How much does that save us, Ben? If it's 200, how much per?
It's $250 per board member, and it saves us $400. Some of these are small, but and the biggest part was those textbooks. So there's only about $30,000 worth of other savings in here. Business administration on page 3. Supplies has not gone above, the 14-15 and 15-16 school years were both close to or over $2,000, but the past few years they haven't been. So I'm hopeful that maybe we've found some efficiencies. I propose cutting $200 from that, bringing it down to $1,800. On page 4, fiscal agent. I'm not sure what this is, so I'm not sure that we can cut it. I didn't touch any BOCES things or things like that. So if we can cut it, historically we've never crossed $12,000, so I brought it down to $12,000, and that saves us $1,640.
Ben, do you mean page 4, like the physical page 4, not the Acrobat, not the PDF?
No, it says the page numbers on the top corner.
Top right. The top right has the numbers.
Of the document.
Yeah, no, yeah, I found it. It just didn't match the PDF. I was making sure I was looking at the right thing.
Yeah. On page 5, human resources, license expenses and fingerprinting. Historically, that's actually been a lot of money, $30,000 plus. But in the past 3 years, it seems that we've drastically reduced that by 2/3. I'm hoping that's because we found some sort of efficiency and we can maintain that trend. So I would bring that down to $13,500. Page 6, records management.
Ben, that would be a savings of what, 23,000?
That would save $500.
I don't know if Lynn or if someone else can speak to the fingerprinting piece.
So that's not something that we have any control over. The state education department, or rather the governor, changed how fingerprinting is done. So there's a set fee, and we have to go to identified locations. We pay only for the fingerprinting of our non-instructional employees. We do not pay for fingerprinting for teachers, administrators, or teaching assistants because it's actually a part of their certification process. So they are responsible for that. We obviously are following the laws with regard to who should be fingerprinted and who should not. So we don't put individuals in front of children or children without being fingerprinted. It is limited by the number of individuals that we're hiring. We tend to see a little bit more turnover in some positions than others. The reason why those costs have been going down might be because we're not hiring as many individuals right now. And that trend could continue a little bit. But we don't have any control over that.
The district pays for non-instructional, right? You said?
Yes.
I apologize. I have to leave, and I'm going to have Barb take over the meeting.
Hey, Seema, I don't know how this would work, but I know we have a motion on the floor for consideration for the FTE
Yeah.
and for the gymnastics coach, assistant coach. I don't know if Linda
Before,
or vote on that when you have to leave, or if that doesn't work that way, or however. I mean, we should hear all of Ben's ideas before we, take the final tally, but I didn't know if you wanted to.
yeah, I would like to vote on those two. Those are the two that I would be in favor of. And if we can make space somewhere else, and like I mentioned, I'm not in favor of getting rid of textbook. Also, I think if you're not speaking, maybe you should shut your mic. It's really hard to hear. I know just the ambient noise is picked up. So I don't know, can we go ahead and vote on those amendments? Is everyone okay with that?
Would it be contingent on finding it someplace else, or is it, that's my concern is, are we taking it from fund balance? Or are we taking it from someplace else in the budget? And that's why it's sort of hard at this point. I would like to vote yes, but I don't want to go over our limits. So I'm just raising that, Seema, as a question about do we vote on it individually or on the package as a whole?
I mean,
Well-
I'm in favor of using fund balance for that, but I think even if I leave, then you still have 6, correct? You still have 5 you can to have a quorum to vote for, but I mean, I would prefer to vote for it because those are the only 2 things that that really stand out to me. And I prefer to use fund balance for that, but I am trusting that you guys will make good decisions based on what we've discussed already.
Well, the recommendation could be you just make the amendment,
Yeah.
and it would be up to, if we agree to some of the other cuts that Ben makes, then we wouldn't have to take as much of the fund balance. So as long as the concept, I think, is approved, I think, we're good to go. So do you want to do that before you leave?
Sure.
So let's do the FTE first.
So I need a motion to make an amendment to the budget to add 1 FTE.
That was me.
Barb, a second.
Gloria.
Second, Gloria.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
My concern is what I've said, that we have to be careful where we take it from. I would like to vote yes, as long as we don't put ourselves in trouble with it. So if I say yes, I'm saying yes contingent on making sure that we stay under, so we don't, so we don't go over the.
Yeah, I understand.
Right. Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes.
The second motion was to restore the gymnastics assistant coach.
Yep. We'll make a motion to include the assistant coach for the gymnastics team.
Mhm.
Need a
Second.
motion? Oh, second, or sorry, Barb made a motion, Gloria second. Any other discussion? In 1 minute. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, have fun, Seema.
Hold on, we'll get, Ben, did you vote yay or nay? Sorry, I didn't get.
Nay.
Okay, so 6 yeses and 1 no. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I got that. And thank you, Barb.
Have fun.
Have fun, Seema.
And thank you for doing that.
She's gone. Yeah.
Okay, Ben, you want to continue?
So Barb, not to interrupt, but I agree with Judy. Like, I know we agreed that it's a priority. We don't know where the money's coming from right now.
That's
No.
what we're trying to figure out.
Unless we agree to some of the savings that Ben has found, or if somebody else has, any ideas, it would come out of the fund balance. And as I think
Okay.
Ben pointed out, we have for this year, about 2 million in fund balance, and you can only keep, a certain percentage
Sure.
without moving them to reserve funds. So,
Okay.
this year, I think we could easily cover those 2 additions and still have money set aside, for the rainy day that we know is coming.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Yeah, more than a rainy day, a rainy year, rainy 2 years. You know, it's going to be some serious stuff, and so we have to. I feel like I'm doing the Dick White's thing, where you want to add this, what are you going to take away? And that's what my
Right. Ben, you mentioned these elementary supervisors, and you thought we could save $683. And although, you know, everybody may laugh and say, well, that's just a small amount of money. Can we just get some feedback from admin on that? Because every little bit to me, you know, helps. Anybody want to comment on that one?
Is this elementary textbooks or materials and supplies?
This is page 13, elementary supervisor.
Supplies,
Principal supplies.
supplies.
I don't think he got to that part yet, but did you?
That was the first thing he mentioned. Page
He
13.
jumped, yeah, he jumped to that first.
Oh, are you talking the books?
No, it was before
No.
that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Ben, you want to clarify that again?
Yeah, it seems like the middle school and the high school are using that money that we're allocating per pupil to general principal supplies. But based on the past 5 years, it doesn't look like we come close at the elementary level. And so I was just proposing a modest reduction of 30 cents per pupil, which is a savings of about $680, brings us to a budget line of 7,000, which, like I said, in the past 5 years, we've never crossed 6,000.
Damien, you want to comment on that one? Or are you okay with that one?
Honestly, that's a hard one for me to comment on. I don't really oversee the supply purchasing for each of the buildings like that. I will tell you that I do have a lingering fear going into next year that we're going to need additional supplies for our classrooms, not less. Regardless of the history of the past, I think we are right now having a lot of conversation about what we will need to make our classrooms functional and safe and have the right supplies. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it, honestly, Barbara, to really comment. I think it's really a question for the elementary principals to speak to more so than me. But I do look forward to next year and what some anticipated needs might be.
Neil, can you jump in? Do you have any way to get to the detail of what gets purchased out of that line?
I don't off the top of my head, but I would think they would be more office supply type items than the clerical or than the instructional on the principal side.
Yeah, Neil, that can't be the instructional supply. That has to be the office supply line.
It's the office.
Right. So, again, just thinking about new protocols and safety procedures, are we going to need to purchase, I don't know, gloves for the office or masks or, things that may be needed that we haven't even really been able to put our fingers on just yet. But, again, I'm not the person who can answer that question the best.
Okay, Ben, do you want to clarify that anymore? Or are you satisfied with the explanation? Or you still like to propose the cut?
I mean, I'm suggesting all of these cuts, even if they're getting voted down, I think that, I think that, like I said, at some point we're going to have to start cutting, I will say that I've based all my cuts looking back over 5 years. And that's where my recommendations come from. Things that looks like we're just keeping in the budget so that just in case, those are the items that I've identified and proposed cutting. If the administration, says we need them, then they can say that, and but I still do recommend them.
Neil, just a quick question for you. If the 5-year look back has shown that we could potentially save $680, as small as that seems, if, as Damien pointed out, suddenly, we have to buy wipes and gloves and masks and all these kinds of things. Could those come out of any other line, or are we stuck with not being able to do that?
Well, all of this money is allocated for the need in which it's intended. So if we have some of those additional costs that we haven't had to buy before, we really don't have a ready place to go for that. We've not added anything in the budget to take care of what school may look like next year and what different requirements we might have in place.
Mhm.
So this is operating as usual as opposed to our new way of providing education going forward.
Right. But now we have in the past made transfers from one line to another. I know there are certain lines that you can't transfer and others that you can. Could those costs be absorbed within a maintenance line or something like that?
It could, it really depends on the volume of what we're being asked to do. On a small basis, we have little variations here and there across departments and across schools. And when you look at something like this, if we're short in one school and some other school needs it, we can transfer money back and forth. What we're facing next year is hard to say what exactly we're going to need to have in place in order to have safe and effective instruction of children. So that is the wild card, and what that may look like and what we're going to be obligated to buy, what's available, how much is it going to cost. All of those are unknown at this point in time.
So I just reached out to Alan Lockwood. I mean, one of the disadvantages of being in this environment is we can't tap into the people who live and breathe this. And he raises the same concerns that you've heard from Damien and from Neil about the unexpected of next year and the need for purchases that we've never had to purchase before, like masks, gloves, cleaning supplies, plexiglass, and who knows what else. So I think, well, I mean, obviously this is now in the board's hands, but, you know, I think we need to be prepared to respond with, we're not even sure what, to make sure our buildings and our offices are clean and ready to go, to serve students and keep them healthy, and our adults, provided for. I mean, I just don't know how to respond to this kind of in this forum without being able to do any of additional homework that we've been working on this for quite a while. And I just can't predict whether or not we'll need that line down the road.
Can I just say something? I think it's very likely that you're going to need more money than this to make up for the supplies. Like this unknown, I think, is almost certainly going to be more expensive and not less so. And even though I totally agree with Ben that, we need to make hard decisions, I think this is like an area that I wouldn't cut.
I think if we can wait, leave the money in this year, see what we need and how we use it in terms of these new roadblocks that we're facing because of the pandemic, it might be better to leave them there for this year. And if we say next year, oh, look, we didn't use all that we had allocated, that would be a good sign. But I think right now the sign is we ought to probably keep these things so that we have them, because life is going to be different.
I think it's the unpredictability that is the challenge here, and trying to plan for something that we don't really know what it's going to look like or what our needs are going to be. And I do think we're going to need more resources, not less, as we open the school year.
Okay, what about the human resources fingerprinting? Anybody have any comments on that for Ben? According to Lynn, the numbers have come down. Could we save at least part of that $5,000 or all of the $5,000 on that line? Anybody have any feelings on that?
What I'm hearing is that, I mean, what I've gone after here is the fat, in the budget. And so if the board feels like we need the fat, well, we probably want to leave every $500 that we can, so that in March next year, we can do all these budget transfers that we usually do to reallocate towards the need.
I think the frustration, Ben, is we don't know if it's fat or not.
Right.
You know, it looks like fat because I agree with you. You look at the 5 years back, and if we don't use it, but now we're in an unknown time. So the frustration is, well, all of a sudden, is that going to change? So I'm leaning more towards, because of my frustration, is saying, let's look at the fund balance. Let's do what we say as a priority. Let's take the money out of there. And then at the end of this year, we roll whatever we haven't used from those lines over into to make up for that. But we don't know what the amounts are going to be. There's no way of us guessing. I mean, we could guess, but I don't think that's a good way of proceeding. I would rather see us just decide, let's take the money we want for the two priorities out of the fund balance for now. And then next spring or whenever, we know what we've spent, we know what we've needed. If there's extra, or if we haven't used it all, and I agree with you, Ben, we may not. I mean, you just look at over the 5 years, we don't always, but we don't know with this year. It's so different. And then we put that money that we can back in.
Well, you know, on this particular issue, I'm a little more amenable to a little cut here, only because of the fact that we're probably not going to be hiring people. You're probably going to be cutting people. So, and these are just the non-instructional people. These are your bus drivers, cafeteria workers, correct, Lynn?
Yeah, here's my concern. While it's not our intention to, hire a whole bunch of new people, we may have a large portion of our current staff that may not be able to return or make a decision not to return this fall. So while it wasn't the plan to replace a whole bunch of new employees, we may find ourselves in those circumstances. The other thing that we don't have any control over is the cost of each fingerprint. So sometimes it's $99, then all of a sudden it's $105, and then it's $99. We have no control over that cost either. So in this particular circumstance, we can't really predict what we're going to be faced with as we move into a new school year with circumstances where people may not feel comfortable returning. While we may be reducing in some categories, we may find ourselves with mass populations of individuals not returning and us starting all over again and finding new staff members.
So you don't think we can even make a little cut?
I can't, what I'm saying is I would not be able to predict the future. The last 5 years, have been improvements over what they were even when I started here. I can't forecast what's going to happen because we haven't moved close enough to the new school year to understand what trends we're going to have. I think we're just in really unprecedented times. I wish I could predict better what circumstances we're entering.
Well, Ben, do you want to make a motion to save $1,000 on that line, or do you just want to let it pass, or what's your prerogative?
I think the feeling is I mean, I'm willing to make as many motions as you want, Barbara, but the feeling I'm getting is that we want to keep the fat for next year because we don't know what we're going to need.
Well, I hear that, but on this particular line, there's a big disparity, and even at $100 a whack, there would be how much left in that line if you were to cut your original 5,000?
But 500 from that line. Sure, Barb, I'll make a motion to cut $500 from the fingerprinting.
$500 is only maybe 5 people, and you still have how many thousands of dollars in that line?
$13,000 left.
$13,000. That to me is whopping big. I mean, we've put in the coaching, so even a $500 savings is going to add more to our, to the fund balance. So if you make a motion, I'll second it.
Motion made.
Anybody else want to address it? No, then let's vote on it.
I think it's okay to decrease that. I mean, I don't think we're going to be doing a lot of hiring, and if there's some place fat to cut, I guess we can cut $500 out of that.
Anybody else?
At this point, it's nitty gritty little things that not are really, but
Right.
so-
I vote no. um, I
I
just,
vote no. I vote no.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think
I'm
it's-
voting no,
I
so.
don't feel comfortable going about it this way, but
Okay, we have to call the vote then. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3, and those opposed?
Nate,
Nay?
Nay.
So that's 3 to 3, so it goes down.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
to get away from the little tiny itty gritty ones right now? As far as like a salary for on page 5, like our attorney salary, it goes up very high, like almost 5% when everything else, teachers going up 1.7, admin's going up like 2 something percent. Is there a reason why the lawyer attorney fees are going up so high for, going up $5,500? Again, still nitty gritty little things. And I see it kind of goes up each year. Is that a negotiated thing, or is that what their going rate is and that we have to pay that?
Neil, you can answer that for her, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's really historical, and if you can see the kind of increases we've had, so we went from 81,000 to 88,000 to 107,000. So it's a more complex world. The services of our attorney as well as anybody in the district in terms of the types of matters that we're involved in and where we need legal advice and help and assistance. So that trend is what we're capturing here going forward. And I think certainly over the past couple of months, we've relied on our attorney quite a bit as we've tried to navigate COVID-19 as well. So, but the basic issue is we continue to see some growth in that, and we've experienced a variety of different issues and challenges where we need the advice of our attorney.
So that's a standard thing, kind of. I think we're all in the wrong career field except for maybe Ben. Okay. That was just kind of a big chunk. I was kind of like, why is it going up so much when everybody else is pretty reasonable increase? But I guess it's just the nature of the profession.
Well, it's utilization. Our rates have not gone up. It's how much we're engaging the students.
Oh, is that? Oh, so it's not like a retainer. It's how much we're using him.
Correct.
We by the hour.
by the hour.
Okay, so it's okay. I'm with you now. All right. Sorry, wasted a minute and a half.
Well,
Continue with
just to clarify,
$250 cut.
we have retainer agreements that give us unlimited calling, but when we get into areas that are litigation or something beyond routine day-to-day issues, then we get charged by the hour. And we've had a number of things that have come along, and honestly, our attorneys protect us from greater liability down the road. So we pay some for that good advice, and it helps us avoid pitfalls that could be very costly down the road.
I'm with you. Thanks.
Very good. Okay, any other issues anybody wants to bring up? Okay, now we have voted for 2 amendments to the budget, and now we go to approve the budget with those amendments. Correct, Marie?
Need one additional amendment for fund balance if that's the direction you're going in. You don't have a balanced budget right now.
Oh, okay. So then we need a motion to use the funds from the fund balance to cover the difference in the additions.
I move it. I so moved.
Second? Is
Uh,
that-
Barb,
I'd second.
is there a second? Oh, Rebecca? Okay. Yes, Ben.
I mean, I guess we can vote for this, but I do have the one other suggestion I was going to make that would take a big chunk out is to reduce the unassigned TAs from 4 to 3, kind of a trade-off for that teacher, and that would save a little over 37,000. I know from previous discussions that we don't usually fill those unassigned TA spots or even our assigned TA spots. So, so I'll throw that out there before we vote, potentially a $37,000 saving.
Okay, Marie, can you comment on that?
We have not been able to fill all of our positions in the TA title, and we have had unused unassigned FTEs in the TA position. Again, going forward, can I predict that to be the case? I can predict nothing these days, but that has been the trend where we have not been able to fill TA positions. The only other caveat I would put in is that in classrooms where we've had large class sizes above first or second grade, we have sometimes included a 3-hour teaching assistant to help bring down the ratio of students to adults. So, you know, if we had a large class size in 5th grade, we might think about adding a TA. While I say that, we're also going to be asked to wrestle with social distancing kinds of concerns. We may not be able to add additional people to a confined space like a classroom. So I haven't argued one way or another for this. I've just told you that there's lots of ins and outs to the appropriate thing. But could we absorb that? I would say based on our experience the last couple of years and our ability to fill TA positions, probably. Lynn, do you want to weigh in? You deal with this all the time.
Yeah, no, I think you said everything that needs to be said on that.
Okay,
So this is not a reduction of somebody who's currently in a position. It's a reduction of a potential position for somebody.
Right. We
Correct.
have 4 unassigned TAs in the budget, and this would this is a proposal to reduce it to 3 unassigned TAs.
So it's not a pink slip to somebody. It's
It is not.
no.
kind of an attrition type of thing, for lack of better words. Okay, thanks.
I'd just like to say I mean, from where I come from and having been a TA for many years, it really makes me sad to think that we're cutting positions. But the fact is, if we haven't been able to fill them, we're not really cutting anything. It just makes me sad. TAs make such a difference in a classroom that we have need for more, or we would hope for more. So I don't like this. I can go along with it, but I would rather have more, but that also depends on what the market is. Apparently, it's not favoring hiring more TAs.
Neil, how many TAs are in the current budget?
Lynn, do you know that off the top of your head? I'd have to look it up.
I do not. I don't have the right document up for that.
Okay. But these would be extra, so you're not cutting any positions. These would be additional positions, you know, that we would use if we needed them.
Correct. They would be unassigned, so they would be reserved in the event that we needed more.
Right.
I think what's happened in the past is, first of all, to Marie's point, we haven't been able to fill all of the teaching assistant positions that we have already allocated for. So they're not all full to begin with. And then at times throughout the year, someone leaves for one reason or another, and then we work to fill that position. So we still don't have all of our positions filled. And then a new need arises, and we make an assumption that we still need to fill all of the positions that have not yet been filled. So we request something from the unassigned. And then Neil comes to me at the end of the year and says, we're over budget. And I'm like, we can't be, because they're not all filled at any time during the school year. So it's just a problem that we've had over time. And I think that we are very optimistic in hoping that we're going to fill all of the positions and then fill the new need. But at any given time in the school year, those positions are not all filled. Coupled with the fact that we had several retirements this year in our TA population. So we're starting with 13 open positions right now.
Okay, Ben, do you want to make a motion to eliminate one teaching assistant FTE?
So moved.
You have a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Judy, what do we got from you?
I can't go along with that, I guess, so.
So a 5-1, it passes.
Okay.
Okay. So Neil, do you have anything else, Ben?
Nothing big.
Okay. Neil, do you have the number that we would have to put in the resolution for taking from balance to make it whole? Whoops, you're on mute, Neil.
There we go. The new budget amount is 103,032,695.
Okay, so what figure do we have to use for our motion to take from fund balance to make our budget whole?
We're going to take $49,480.
Okay. So can we use that figure, or should we just make the resolution say, take out of the fund balance what we need? As long as you're sure of those numbers, then I'm glad to use the actual figure, but if you would like a little bit of 20 cents here or 20 cents there, then
Yeah, you can do it in a general form and whatever we need to balance out the budget.
okay, would that be okay with all of you? Okay, we need such a motion then. Is that you, Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay,
I
and second?
motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay, Gloria, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, 6-0. Very good. Okay, so now we've passed that motion. Now we need one more motion to adopt the budget.
Neil,
So
can we repeat the dollar amount?
Of the budget,
Yeah, the overall budget, slower.
103,032,695.
Great, thank you.
I move that we adopt the budget that we've been discussing right now for the 2021 school year.
We need a second.
I second.
Okay, we got the seconds. All those in favor?
Wait,
Aye.
can we have discussion then? I just want to ask Neil, so we'll take some out of the fund balance so that we stay below the tax levy limit. Is that
Right.
what?
We are right at our maximum
So,
allowed. Yep, so we're right there.
all right. So
No
we'll,
margin.
all right, but we'll take out enough so that we're then right at the maximum still without having.
Correct.
Okay.
We're at the tax cap. We have
Okay.
not exceeded the tax cap.
Excellent. So let's formalize the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 6-0. Well, thank you guys for all the
Don't
work, especially Ben. Marie, you have something you want to say?
Well, we have one more piece of business for the board to do before we adjourn.
Oh,
And
okay,
that's to pass the property tax report card for 2020, 2021.
okay.
So it's based on the budget that you just adopted. Congratulations. And our tax levy limit, which we are staying right at. So you have a chart in your materials, which is going to adjust slightly based on the work that we just did. But we can take a motion to approve the 2020, 2021 property tax report card for submission to New York State Ed Department, based on the budget we just adopted.
Okay, who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Ben, I need a second.
Second.
Second, Gloria. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, again, passes 6-0. Again, thank you to everybody that worked on this budget, and Ben particularly for all the hours that you must have put in looking at line by line. Thanks again. I appreciate it. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I was gonna say, nobody wants to go home.
We're already here.
We are
We're
home.
already
Right.
Okay, Rebecca makes a motion to adjourn. Ben seconds it. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Thanks,
You
Jen.
too.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Safe.